Marketing Magic Revealed. And it's all about really coming up with a marketing strategy that's right for you. And that's whether you have a big budget or maybe you're bootstrapping. Our panelists sort of cover A to Z. Really exciting prep call. So I'll go ahead and introduce our moderator, Jason Goldberg. Jason, you're a jack of all trades, so I'll let you kind of fill in any blanks, but you're an award-winning entrepreneur, TEDx speaker, leadership coach, business mentor, host of the Jason Goldberg is Ruining Podcasting podcast, author of the international bestseller on self-leadership titled Prison Break. And I think you had a partnership with NASA at some point. I'm sure I left some things out. So Jason, please introduce yourself and take it away with the next panel.
Well, I mean, the panel's done now. We've run out of time because my bio was too long. So I think you did a beautiful job. Thank you so much, Julia. And I'm so excited to be here. I want to be eligible for one of those packs, by the way. So I'll be in the chat at some point as well. So I can try to win one. So I'm really, really excited to be here and to be with this incredible panel. There's so much true marketing magic that is coming on here. So now can we have our amazing panel turn on their video as well? I don't think any of them are currently in witness protection. So I think we're okay. Let's just make sure. There we go. All right, they're all popping up, looking beautiful, sharp, and ready to rock. Amazing. So, they're, as Julia said, talking about what's going to look like a proper or an effective marketing strategy for you is going to be different, right? Every company is different. It's not one size fits all. And one of the things that became very apparent during our prep call is the power of story in brand building. And I think we know this as humans, as marketers, we connect over story. And so I'm really excited to kind of, jack in Matrix style to all these amazing minds here and extract some of the wisdom of what's worked for them and also what hasn't worked for them when it comes to brand building and storytelling. So first of all, before we dive into that, let's meet the people that are on the panel here today that I'm so excited to have. I'm going to actually throw it over to you first, Sarah, if you don't mind, if you could introduce yourself and kind of let the people know who you are and what you do.
Sure. Well, I'm super excited to be here. My name is Sarah, and I'm head of brand at Byte. Byte is an invisible aligner company that straightens and whitens your teeth from home. We launched a little over 2 years ago and have seen crazy growth, and I'm really excited to chat today about some of the ways that we built our company really around putting the customer first.
Love that. And you have to have an amazing smile to work at Byte. So that was part of your job interview. You did a great job. Amazing. Let's hop over to Tracy. Tracy, introduce yourself for us if you don't mind.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I am Tracy. I'm the director of marketing over at Marketer Hire, which connects companies to marketers, expert pre-vetted marketers within about 48 hours. I come from a journalism background and have been interviewing founders of direct-to-consumer and e-commerce brands for about the last 12 years, so over a decade now. So I have a lot of insights that I've ultimately gathered to help folks learn how to grow brands. I've also worked at some very, very small direct-to-consumer brands, getting them on Shark Tank, all of that jazz, and have my own as well. So excited to talk about story and brand.
Love that. Thank you so much, Tracy. Let's hop over to Matt Scanlon. Can you introduce yourself for us, please?
Hey, what's going on? So I'm Matt Scanlon. I'm the CEO of Notum. I started a brand called Notum 6 years ago as a direct consumer apparel brand in the sustainability space. And then over the past 3 years, shifted Notum into a modern day holdco built to empower visionary founders and their stories through consumer products. So we feel like we just opened a new door and are getting started on something really special. Definitely have a unique opinion on brand storytelling. So happy to share that.
That's awesome. I'm super excited to hear more about that. So thank you, Matt. And last but certainly not least, Brian, whose company has saved me from looking like a Photoshop idiot for years. I would love if you could introduce yourself and tell us about what you do.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jason. Super excited to be here. My name is Brian Kopleski, and I am the creative lead at Canva Studio. So we're a team within Canva that works with all kinds of companies from small to medium businesses up to global brands. Transition onto the Canva platform with their marketing materials, their design assets, their communications, ultimately to bring onto the platform. Before that, I was a creative director at Live Nation Entertainment. I oversaw design for their music festival division. And I've worked in a lot of graphic design and advertising agencies as well over the years. So I think as far as the story is super important. And I think also just from the branding and the design nuts and bolts side too, I've kind of had a little bit of everything. So super excited to be here and chat on the panel.
Amazing. Thank you all so much for being here. And as you can probably already tell by listening to these introductions, you're in store for some really amazing wisdom. And I want to dive right in. And Sarah, I'd love to start with you. So with Byte, and of course, people watching will notice there's some B2C here, there's some B2B here, and there's even some both, right? Canva doing both B2B and B2C. So there's a lot of different perspectives. But for you, Sarah, what was your process for crafting the narrative, crafting the story that would build Byte into this millennial brand?
Sure. Well, it's kind of funny because when I first met our two founders, Scott and Blake, I think in early 2018, I was set up with them by my mentor, and she had told me about this Invisalign competitor that was going to launch, and it just had a name, but they needed someone to create the brand. And my initial response was, "Yeah, that sounds really boring. I think I'm okay. I don't see the vision." I wanted to be in beauty and fashion at that point, and figure out something that I was passionate about in my daily life. And orthodontics, I had never had that interest previously. So at first I didn't see it. And I ended up having lunch with them. Needless to say, very thankful, because I immediately started to connect the dots on, what a smile could mean for a person. And, that this didn't have to be a brand that was just selling plastic and aligners, but it really was connecting with confidence and helping people get after, something more meaningful for them. And so I started to get excited about the challenge of, how do I make this interesting? How do I make teeth sexy? How do I make orthodontics interesting and make it something that is social media worthy? And that really got me excited of figuring out that deeper meaning of what a smile meant. So really understanding the need behind the need for me was important, and understanding how to connect to millennials in a way that would meet them where they are. So that was kind of my first step, was really just putting myself in their shoes and trying to understand what would make me want to talk about, my smile, and get excited to figure out how that would help me in life.
Yeah, I love that. So yeah, so it sounds like really recognizing that it was you're a confidence brand disguised as a teeth alignment company.
Exactly.
Right?
And then, yeah. And then, I mean, that taps into lifestyle, it taps into self-care and beauty, it taps into career aspirations. And then it all of a sudden opens up that storytelling for us to tell.
I love that. So has anybody else in the panel had to kind of sexify something that on the surface kind of feels maybe a little boring, for lack of a better term, but has anybody else here on the panel had to do that same kind of thing like Sarah did? Yeah, Matt, go ahead.
Kind of been the story of my life, is sexifying stories. I turned a random trip into the middle of the Gobi Desert into a brand, and we always struggled to understand how that story that was impactful for us would connect to people, right? Like the value of a brand is how it connects to the consumer, right? Obviously that product has to carry that story, but our story was not a sexy, interesting thing. I literally got lost in the middle of the Gobi Desert, living with Mongolian nomadic herders, and somehow had to make that about cashmere. And, the interesting kind of the thread point through it is, I've taken that experience of taking something that didn't really have a reason to exist, or didn't have like product differentiation tied to it, and through that experience been able to share that with other founders. Our journey has been how to take our experiences, share them with other founders, and then in doing so help other founders operationalize a consumer business. Every story is different. Every brand needs its own sexifying. I don't know if that's a word, if it's appropriate to even say here, but we've learned over time kind of what the tricks of the trade really should look like when it comes to digital marketing, because storytelling online is very different than if we were just talking here and I told you my whole story. I'll end with this. When I started Naadam, I always felt that I could sit in front of anybody, tell my story, and somehow convince you to buy a sweater. It was really illogical. However, just figured I could do that. Taking that thesis and applying it to a set of digital marketing KPIs and multiple marketing touch points is way more challenging. And like we could think of sexifying as polishing it up, making it look good, or we could think about it as like systematizing that approach so that its efficiency is sexy. It's like a really dorky way of explaining our process, but that's essentially how we've translated that experience across multiple brands.
That's awesome. And I'm curious about one thing, just kind of a follow up on that. So with you guys and with Naadam specifically, the whole concept of cashmere with a conscience, how much did that play into your storytelling, and how much for people who do have a cause attached to their marketing, should that be implanted in the story?
So I am a real pessimist when it comes to causality and sustainability. And I hate the word sustainable when it's applied to apparel for the most part, which is very contradictory. I think I say that and people are like, wait, what are you talking about? But, in my experience, if it is not organic and genuine, is it not derived from some factor of real authenticity, it shouldn't exist. You shouldn't force it. And so, we've now seen in other brands we work with, like something Navy or Cocoon, they are supply chains that are as sustainable as Naadam, right? Everything they do is on the backbone of what Naadam built, but it's just not a storytelling mechanism that matters to their brand identity. And forcing it feels inauthentic, regardless of whether or not I can get B Corp certified or, we pass levels of certification. Doesn't matter. And so that's like a real good juxtaposition between these two things. For Naadam specifically, it was tied to our intention, right? Like, we ended up in the middle of the Gobi Desert. We wanted to help a group of people. How did we help them? We just kept on going one step to the next and realizing, oh, well, if we do this, that's a good way to help them here, right? If we do that, that helps this person and that person. And if we do it this way, oh, we don't destroy the environment in the process of making this product. And so it's been I use the word heuristic because we've failed a ton in the process, but it's also been very organic and just the experience of putting different pieces together to get to where you want to go. But it's intention based, I think, is the easiest way to qualify that.
Yeah.
And I'll just add on one last thing to what you said, which is so true. When in the beginning, launching the brand, it was, how do I get attention to Bite? How do I, sexify it? But very quickly, it went right into, how do we make this accessible and the deeper meaning and connecting in an authentic way? And so much of our brand is built on the give back efforts and helping, make orthodontics accessible to all. And that was kind of the heartbeat that now we have become.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and so what I'm hearing from both of you, from Sarah and from Matt so far, is that we can't force the story, we can't force the authenticity, we can't force the cause or the connection to a cause. It has to literally be something that your audience actually cares about, and then of course that you as a brand actually care about. So I think those are great things to think about when we're crafting stories. I'm curious for you, Tracy, because and maybe some of the other businesses here have the same thing, but to me, you have a unique position because you have upstream and downstream customers. Right? You have the candidates that you want to be able to place, and then you have the companies that you want to place them within. So how does that change, or does it change your mechanism and how you tell that story in Marketer?
Yeah, for sure. So two things here. One, just kind of piggybacking on what everyone has already talked about. So my direct-to-consumer brand, which is called Doris Sleep, it sells sustainable bed pillows. That is how we launched. That is originally how we branded. But pretty immediately in the process, we realized nobody cares. When people want to buy pillows, they want those pillows to be comfortable, right? So we have changed the branding, changed the messaging, a variety of things to really help hit on that. Now, of course, sustainability is really important to us. We educate people throughout the process on it, but it is not like our main point, mostly because our audience has told us we don't care, we just want a comfortable pillow. which just kind of speaks to, it's really important to iterate and listen to your audience and your community. What you originally launch with is beautiful and great, and you have to come up with something when you first start, but then always be willing to change and listen to the consumer as you grow. For Marketer Hire, 100%. We have, half of our business focused on trying to attract, companies, e-commerce brands, B2B brands. And then the other half is we need, actual really good marketers who are then willing, to take these jobs. So on one hand, we market to the companies in terms of like, hey, here are all the other brands that these companies have worked at. We can, introduce you to folks within 48 hours. Most folks can ultimately, start within a week. And then to Sarah's point on the orthodontic side, on our side, we talk a lot about accessibility. Expert marketers, really good marketers are expensive. And so, we do everything we can to, be fair to both sides of the party and really help educate folks that maybe don't have a ton of, budget for a really good marketer on how they can kind of hire, individual freelancers and like a waterfall method so that they are getting all the expertise they need, but maybe not all at once. And then on the freelancer side, really our main point over there is like, hey, are you a really good freelancer who doesn't want to like promote themselves all the time on social and drive their own client pipeline? We'll drive client pipeline for you. So that tends to be the argument over there that works well.
Yeah, so really being in touch with their fears, their frustrations, the aspirations of what they want their career to look like and what they're sick of doing, just really honing in on that story. Yeah.
Right. Well, and again, going back to the original point, at Marketer Hire, we change that stuff a lot, right? We are constantly listening to the community. We are talking to our freelancers. We are talking to companies. Anytime someone leaves a review, we are reading through that review, trying to pull their language out, put that language in emails, put that language on our homepage, whatever it might be, because at the end of the day, as much as like we think we know our brand and we're trying to steer it in a certain direction, ultimately the consumer knows best. And the people who are really in love with your company and the way that they say, like the way they talk about your company is the way you should be talking about your company to attract more people like those people.
Yeah, I love that. That's so great. Thank you for sharing that. Brian, question for you, now that we're kind of talking a little bit about the B2C side. I'm curious, I've always known Canva as a consumer brand for myself, right? I've used it personally for years and years and years. And you working on the B2B side as well. Do you see a difference in storytelling that the emotional part of the storytelling is different if you're telling a story to business versus telling it to consumers? What have you seen that's kind of worked well and maybe not worked so well in storytelling when you're doing B2B?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, even maybe several years back, I think there was this idea that there is this division between how, a business would go B2B versus B2C, just as far as like, different tactics and different strategies. But, I think especially with a platform like Canva that really is kind of integrating and synthesizing all different kinds of companies. And even just hearing, folks, on our panel talk about their experiences and like the companies that they're building, like they often kind of straddle different lines. Like, I don't know, like, I mean, of course, there's still companies that very much like stay in a lane, but I think more than ever, even when I'm talking to, particular, founders or CMOs or whoever, like, brands and companies and products sort of straddle different, different channels, and they have, multiple objectives, and it isn't necessarily just one particular audience. So I think you find a lot more, traditional kind of like, B2C stuff, like really around like story and like the sort of emotional pull of the story or the personal pull of the story really start to get introduced more into what you would consider to be more traditional B2B marketing. And I think just especially, even just over the last like year and how just like the seismic shifts that are happening and, just the way companies are structured and like how companies are having to pivot to find more, new avenues for business or new sources of income. Yeah, I mean, B2C companies are going more B2B and vice versa. I think just as far as being able to, reach as many people as possible. What I really love about like just this panel so far, I mean, we're talking about story, and I think like even just like, with Sarah talking about like the beginnings of, her company and like just talking about like, here we are at the beginning, what is this? And then Matt talking about the story and then applying that, more on the strategic side and the, starting to introduce these ideas of like how to market it. And then you take it to Tracy, who's talking about, like measurable results and working with marketers. And I think like the next part of the story is where I'm particularly like have been focused, and that's on the design and kind of, the brand marketing side of things. Like oftentimes, this would be the stage in the process where I would be, as a graphic designer or a brand builder, talking to one of these, founders or CMOs. Like, they've had to pivot, they've had to have those really big kind of open conversations, trying to figure out what it is exactly they're doing. They've honed in on like who their audience is or who they think it is. And then it's like, okay, like we have this story, but like, how do we practically put that out into, marketing channels? And I think like, we talk a lot about the sexiness and the sexifying of like the story, and it's very easy to go that route. And like, when you think of branding, and it almost kills me to say this as someone who comes from like an art school and brand, kind of like background, but like the functionality of your brand, like it has to work for you. Like that's more important at this point in this very sort of like agile, nimble, multimedia space, rather than like the aesthetic. Like the aesthetic, of course, is important, but like if your brand, like if it can't like wake up today and be like a super horizontal banner ad and then tomorrow be like a super vertical Instagram story, like there's like a problem in, your scalability as far as your core brand, like your logo, colors, fonts, like graphic elements that weave it all together. And, not a lot of people have the, maybe the benefit of working with like a giant, agency to provide tons and tons of things. So I would just encourage everybody, on the, listening to the panel today, just to, really just sort of audit like the actual, nuts and bolts of your, visual brand, and make sure that it's flexible and can jump from one medium to the next, just depending on the opportunity.
I love that. Such a great insight and such an entirely different perspective, and thinking about the aesthetic in that way. I love that. And speaking of insights, if you people all watching here live, I'd love for you to drop your biggest insight so far. We have a few minutes left and there's still more to come here, but I'd love for you to drop your biggest insight in the chat window so we can see that as well. So one thing I want to say here is I think it could be the yeah, but will come up a lot. I think we're talking about this kind of stuff, and the yeah, but is, yeah, but Byte probably has millions of dollars in marketing spend available to them, and that's why they're able to do this. And so I want to just speak to them. And I've never heard a marketer say I have too much money. That's nothing I've ever heard from them before. So Sarah, I'd love to hear from you. What's been your experience with kind of bootstrapping versus having a large budget when it came to building the Byte brand?
Yeah, that's a great question. And Brian, we love Canva. So I would say, back to when I started, I had this perfect way in my head of, building this brand specifically, back to that word of like making a cool brand, making it beautiful, aesthetically, going to show up in a cohesive way across all channels. And then I found out I had no budget. I had very little budget, I should say, and no kind of areas to do real photo shoots or, get all of the, most beautiful houses in LA to do all these, crazy kind of ad campaigns. And that's where things really shifted in terms of me having to figure out how to do things in a scrappy way, be able to test, to prove a concept, to even ask for money. And what we really leaned into out of necessity, and also it ended up really being what worked for us, was user-generated content. So leaning into our customers, back to putting them first, understanding, what their journey with Byte was at that time. So whether it was the wedding story or confidence, and tapping into having them become the faces of Byte. So it turned into something where I had a lot of content as I got them engaged in a community with me in terms of cranking out their story. But then I needed to lean on tools like Canva because I had no creative team. So it was really a one-woman team at that point of me trying to figure out how to get content for free, how to, inspire our customers to actually share their smiles, and then create and test with it. So it was something that I had to learn to be very flexible with. I had to kind of get rid of that perfect image in my head. And what I ended up finding was the content that performed was not the most beautifully curated content. It was the real, the raw, the authentic content that, worked for us. So I would just say flexibility is key, and, just getting scrappy and trying things out and not being scared for it to fail, because you usually find that magic within that.
I love that. I love that model. I love that example. And I'm curious from anybody else here, has anybody else focused a lot on the user voice or user generated content and kind of the virality of people sharing their own personal stories? Has anybody else done that here?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So one of my biggest insights and things I've been able to do really successfully at startup e-commerce brands is, especially as you start getting some of those first customers, what we've done multiple times is build out like these small little Facebook groups where we allow like only 100 people in. They're typically like very early customers. And then we like talk to them a bunch. We give them discounts, we help with product, whatever it might be. But ultimately, especially as a small brand, especially when Sarah's like, you know, you're trying to get free content like that, it's hard when you don't have a budget. Really cultivating that like first group of 100 people can be very helpful in terms of, you know, helping to drive that UGC. And then also do not be afraid to just like use your iPhone and you as a founder telling your story on why you started. That stuff can be really, really powerful too. So anyways, just a few tips for everybody else who's like Sarah and me and working on very small budgets.
Jason, I can add to it through,
man.
you know, a lot of what we do is try to harness current customers to drive new customers. And a lot of it is through referral. And when you look at the share messages that people share, there's one example I have with a company that sold gift cards, right? And so we looked at the share messages they did, and we thought it would be around, oh, I saved money, I got 10% less, or I got 15% off. But it was almost exclusively around date night and home renovation, right? So it actually changed the overall message in the company to be around date night and fixing your house. Right. So what we thought was mostly a discount oriented value proposition was really around an aspirational value proposition. The other thing I would mention is in thinking about the content creators, also think about the content sharers. So there are, you know, when you give people the ability to share content, if you can track it in some way so you understand whose content, not just whose content is getting read, which is what a Bitly link could do, but whose share gets read. It says the same video or the same image could be seen by, you know, 1,000 people, but it could be that 800 of them came through one woman. And you want to know who that woman is.
I love that. That's so good to know. And actually, Matt, if you don't mind introducing yourself just for a moment, I'd love people to know a little bit about your background, especially
just in my as I wallow in my shame. Yes, I shall.
No. We saved the best for last. You're
good.
Like
there you go.
Coming in.
Matt Roach. I am the CEO of Extol. We are a customer engagement platform, and our really unique approach is we're about saying what percentage of the customer base can you get to do things, because we believe that marketing is more than just a coupon, and that a customer is more than just a credit card. And so what we really try to do is figure out what types of groups you have, what types of activities people do. Like, are they the type of people who share? Are they the type of people who comment or rate or review? Or are they the type of people who, you know, because the more people do, the better your brand is. And I actually believe that the measure of a brand is the sum of all the conversations happening in that moment about that brand. And so all we want to do is make sure that you can encourage it, give incentives for it, recognize it, thank people for it.
Love that. So good. Thank you, Matt. But just coming in and dropping the wisdom bomb. I love it. So we're getting ready to wrap up here, and I'd love to spend all day with all of you, but I'd love to just kind of have a rapid fire one question, and I'd love all of you to answer if you can. I'm putting you on the spot. You had no idea what this question was. If we were going to be having this conversation again 2 years from now, what's something we would be talking about 2 years from now that we should start looking at now? Who wants to jump in first?
Sure, I'll go first. So for me, that is about the privacy first web. So as operating systems really shut down or you know, improve their privacy, and marketers as a result lose a lot of their attribution, you're going to be wishing this time next year that you had started building up content programs and other ways to drive people to your company outside of those paid digital channels. So start doing that work right now.
Amazing. Love that. Perfect. Matt Scanlon, anything you want to add there?
Well, yeah, it's kind of in the same vein, you know, because we've been immediately hit with the iOS changes between, you know, Apple and Facebook. And so I think it's a heftier reliance on retention strategies, right? For us, it's all about how much does your customer come back? How much money do you make off of a customer after you've initially acquired them? If we're assuming that we can't follow people all over the internet anymore and pepper them with ads based on everything we know about them, then what we need to get really good at is making things that get them to come back over and over again. So we're really focused on retention. And if that is not the name of the game 2 years from now, I'll probably be out of the job.
Love that. Well, let's hope that's not the case, but I definitely agree with you. Brian, how about you?
Yeah, I I honestly, I think 2 years from now, we'll be talking about this time, and I think like this has been, a year and a half that, everybody has had to pivot to some degree. And I think question really everything as to what it means to be, marketing, not only just as far as like storytelling and messaging, but also the mechanics and the actual platform. So I think really this is, I think 2 years from now, like people should be talking about the pivots that they made and not what they tried to go back to before the pandemic. So
yeah, love that. That's amazing. Thank you so much for that. Matt Roach, the resident ninja. What do you got?
I would say it is that the concept of owned media. So this is going to dovetail with what you guys have already said, this concept that I have to sell into my customer base because they're the ones I know, that your customer base is the heart of your owned media. And knowing who they are, and more importantly, the social graph of your customer base is going to be absolutely essential. So I'd say stop thinking about it as the web pages or the app as your own media and start thinking about your customer base as your own media.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks for sharing that. Love that. And last but not least, Sarah, what are we going to be talking about 2 years from now that we should be looking at now?
Yeah, I mean, I think just continuing to really know who you are. I think in this last year, similarly, we saw a lot of brands probably feel the need to force a pivot, and whether that be what they were speaking about. Obviously, we saw the word, that brands were being performative in a lot of ways, and all of a sudden talking about things that they may have not been speaking about before. And I think it really, goes back to knowing what you stand for, what your brand values are, who you are, and creating a community that believes in you and that trusts in you so that you can have that voice. Because I think we saw that, just selling a good product is not everything. You have to have that story. You have to have some heart to you. And that's what's also going to have your customer connect and community grow.
Amazing. Beautiful. You guys did not disappoint at all. I knew you were going to be an amazing panel, and you absolutely were. Thank you all so much for being here. Really appreciate all the insights. Hope you all watching got a ton of insights as well that you're going to apply. And Miss Julia, if you could please take it away.
Yeah, thank you all so much.